You'd think a lunar colony would be a vacation spot, space strolls, Earthrise views, maybe a snazzy bar selling overpriced Tang cocktails. But no, it's mostly dust, malfunctioning machinery, and a constant threat of explosive decompression. Welcome to the lunar paradise, where hope goes to die and engineers like me, Walter Rigby, are dragged along for the grim journey. I was in the bowels of the colony, elbow deep in a generator that had decided to audition for the role of biggest pain in the ass. Sparks were flying, and not in the romantic sense. The thing was older than my grandmother's grudges and about as temperamental. "Walter," came the familiar screech of Captain Jane No-Nonsense Morgan over my comm. "Is that generator fixed yet? We're one power failure away from playing hide and seek in the dark with the airlock controls." "Relax, Captain," I grunted, yanking a stubborn wire. "I'm almost done, just convincing this heap of junk that it's in its best interest not to kill us all." "Less joking, more working," she snapped back, a masterclass in the art of motivation through mild terror. I wiped the sweat off my brow, which was impressive considering the low gravity didn't exactly encourage sweat to behave normally. It just floated around, occasionally getting in your eyes like a salty space mosquito. As I contorted to reach a particularly elusive circuit, a glint caught my eye from the corner of the maintenance bay. Something was poking out of the rock wall, not unlike an unwelcome zit on the moon's otherwise pockmarked face. I squinted, curiosity piqued. It was shiny, which meant it was either valuable or dangerous. Knowing my luck, probably both. "Huh," I muttered, "because you talk to yourself when you're alone on the moon. It keeps the loneliness at bay, or at least makes it feel like you're narrating a really low-budget sci-fi movie." I pried the object free with a wrench, revealing a sleek, metallic artifact. It was about the size of a shoebox and hummed with a power that made the hair on my arm stand up, or would have if they weren't being so lazy in this gravity. The thing looked like a cross between a laptop and a medieval torture device, which was, let's be honest, all the rage in futuristic design these days. "Captain, I've got something," I reported, trying to sound professional and not like I just found a new toy. "Unless it's a coffee maker, I'm not interested," she replied, clearly having a day. "I think it's alien," I added, figuring that might spice things up. There was a pause, an indication I'd finally said something worth her attention. "Alien, huh? Just what we need. Bring it up. But if it starts hissing or flashing, ditch it faster than you would a bad blind date." I tucked the artifact under my arm, careful not to press any buttons. The last thing we needed was to accidentally activate the Destroy All Humans feature. As I made my way to the main deck, I couldn't shake the feeling that this little find was going to make life a whole lot more complicated. Meanwhile, not too far away in the cosmic sense, but practically eons in human terms, Zintak, an alien emissary with a penchant for Earth culture, was observing us with a mix of fascination and amusement. The crew had nicknamed him Zinny because, well, why not? It annoyed him, which was a bonus. "Humans are truly peculiar," Zintak mused, his voice a blend of condescension and curiosity that only an alien could pull off. "Their obsession with fiction is intriguing. They create elaborate tales of adventure and despair, yet here they are, living in a place straight out of their own disaster movies." His companion, a fellow alien who had the personality of a wet blanket, nodded. "Indeed, and yet they persist." "Oh, they do more than persist," Zintak chuckled, a sound not unlike a cat coughing up a hairball. "They thrive on chaos like it's their primary fuel source. I wonder what they'll do with the artifact." Back on the lunar colony, I dropped the artifact onto the captain's desk, trying to look like I hadn't just carried a potential doomsday device through several pressure-sealed doors. "Ta-da," I declared, like a magician revealing an especially disappointing rabbit. Captain Morgan inspected it with the kind of skepticism usually reserved for emails promising large sums of money from overseas princes. "And you're sure it's not just a particularly ugly paperweight?" "It's humming," I pointed out, as if the noise it emitted was a selling point. So do you, after 3 days in the same jumpsuit, she retorted, but her eyes gleamed with the thrill of discovery. Or maybe just the thrill of not being bored for once. As we poked and prodded the artifact, it became increasingly clear that we were out of our depth, which wasn't unusual. Humanity's reach often exceeded its grasp by a fair margin, especially in space. Maybe we should call in the science team, I suggested, though the words tasted like defeat. Engineers didn't like admitting they needed help. It was like a lion asking a gazelle for hunting tips. The captain nodded, already reaching for her comm. Let's see if the brainiacs can make sense of it. In the meantime, don't let it out of your sight. Or the airlock. As I left the office, I could have sworn the artifact's hum had a smugness to it, like it knew it was about to become the most interesting thing on this rock. Elsewhere, Zintak watched with growing interest. Ah, humans, he sighed, always poking things they don't understand. It's amazing they've survived this long. Still, they do have a flair for the dramatic. His companion, who had about as much humor as a lump of space rock, simply grunted. Indeed. Zintak turned back to his screens, a sly smile playing across whatever passed for lips. I think this will be entertaining. Let's see how their fiction stacks up against reality. And so, on this dusty moon, under a sky full of stars that couldn't care less, a story began to unfold. It was a tale of humans doing what they did best, making things complicated, surviving despite themselves, and occasionally, just occasionally, doing something remarkable. As for me and the rest of the lunar misfits, we were about to find out just how complicated life could get when fiction decided to come knocking on our door, courtesy of one mysterious artifact. Here's hoping it doesn't end with the usual earth-shattering kaboom. Zintak floated in his observation chamber, a sleek, minimalist room with views of the lunar colony below, a place of humorless chaos and human ingenuity, with the emphasis on chaos. The blinking lights of his console reminded him of Christmas, a human holiday he found delightfully absurd. A fat man in red squeezing down chimneys. Humans, truly, were a whimsical species. Counselor Tizor, he addressed the shimmering hologram of the alien council. The council's faces were unimpressive, just multi-tentacled blobs, each more wrinkled than a Shar-Pei in a sauna. I bring news from the lunar colony. The council, ever the embodiment of cosmic curiosity and bureaucratic boredom, hummed in synchronized acknowledgement. Tizor, who resembled a particularly old and grumpy water balloon, leaned forward. What have you observed, Emissary Zintak? The humans have discovered an artifact, Zintak reported, pride infusing his tone. It's from the collection we accidentally lost 5 millennia ago. Tizor's eyes, if one could call them that, widened. The fiction transmuter, precisely, Zintak confirmed, trying not to sound too pleased. And as expected, they've begun poking it without any regard for what it might do. Humans, another council member clicked, a sound like 2 metal spoons grating against each other. They poke everything. Zintak nodded. Indeed, their curiosity is matched only by their audacity. They're fiddling with it as we speak, blissfully unaware of the potential for. Well, cataclysm isn't too strong a word, Tizor sighed, a sound like a deflating balloon. Monitor them closely. Their fiction becoming reality could destabilize the entire sector. Zintak chuckled, a noise reminiscent of marbles in a blender. Oh, I'm counting on it. Back at the lunar colony, Walter stared at the artifact sitting innocently on the workbench. It hummed with a life of its own, not unlike a pet cat that was both fascinating and slightly irritating. Around him, the repair crew shuffled like zombies in a B-movie, each one pretending not to be curious. "What's it do?" asked Rico, a fellow engineer with a penchant for asking questions nobody had answers to. "Who knows?" Walter shrugged. "Might be a fancy paperweight, might end the world." "We're in a Schrodinger's cat situation here, minus the cat," Rico smirked. "If it ends the world, at least we won't have to fix that damn generator anymore." "Silver linings," Walter agreed, rolling his eyes. As the team went about their business, strange things started happening. Nothing dramatic at first, just odd little quirks that made an already stressful environment even more delightful. A wrench turned into a rubber chicken. Captain Morgan's coffee turned into what appeared to be liquid glitter, and the colony's PA system began blasting the theme song from a forgotten 20th century cartoon about mutated reptiles trained in martial arts. "Walter," Captain Morgan's voice boomed over the comm, equal parts anger and confusion. "Why is my coffee glittery, and why does it taste like a rainbow threw up in it?" Walter grimaced. "I'm gonna take a wild guess and say it's the artifact. Maybe it's, I don't know, tapping into our subconscious or something." "Great," Morgan huffed. "So now we're dealing with a mind-reading gizmo that doesn't even have the decency to make decent coffee." "Fix it, Rigby." Walter considered the artifact, now glowing ominously. Fixing something alien was like trying to teach a dog quantum physics, but the alternative was more glitter coffee, and nobody wanted that. In the meantime, the colony began to resemble a low-budget circus. Tools turned into random objects, someone's hair inexplicably became bright blue, and the PA system wouldn't stop playing that damn turtle tune. It was as if reality was taking a sick day and madness had clocked in. Okay, Walter muttered to himself, trying to think. How do you turn off a fiction-making artifact from outer space without a manual or any real understanding of what it does? Rico, who had been overseeing the generator's temper tantrums, wandered over, now sporting a pair of donkey ears. "You look like you could use a drink. Or 50. "Don't tempt me," Walter replied. "But first, I've got to figure out how to keep this thing from turning the colony into a live-action roleplay of Alice in Wonderland." Meanwhile, in the observation chamber, Zintak watched with glee as things spiraled out of control. "Oh, this is just priceless," he said to his companion, who was now looking slightly less like a wet blanket and more like a damp towel left out too long. "Humans, given the chance, will turn even the most mundane setting into a disaster waiting to happen." His companion grunted in agreement. "It's recreational." "Exactly," Zintak exclaimed. "They're like cosmic toddlers, stumbling around, breaking things, and occasionally doing something staggeringly clever." Back on the colony, Walter was staring at the artifact, which now had tentacles. "Is it just me, or is that thing growing more limbs?" Rico scratched one of his donkey ears. "Either that or I've finally lost it, not ruling it out." The captain barged in, looking like she had just stepped off a roller coaster, not at all enthused. "Walter, this is getting out of hand." "I know," he said, keeping his eyes on the artifact. "We need to figure out how to shut this thing down before it gets worse." "Can't you just unplug it?" Rico suggested, half joking. Walter laughed, a dry sound. "Yeah, and then what? It explodes and we all get a front row seat to an unscheduled spacewalk." Morgan crossed her arms, her expression a mix of worry and determination. "We need to think smarter, not harder." "What's the one thing that humans are best at? Making bad decisions," Walter offered. "Besides that," Morgan said, rolling her eyes. "Surviving them," Rico replied. "Exactly," Morgan said. "So let's do what we do best, make a plan, screw it up, and somehow come out the other side still breathing." And so, with a vague plan in mind, the team set to work. They poked and prodded the artifact, trying to understand its strange, mercurial nature, while avoiding any further reality-bending incidents. Meanwhile, the colony continued its descent into delightful absurdity. At one point, the PA system switched to playing the theme song from a 90s sitcom about a dysfunctional family, and Captain Morgan's left boot spontaneously combusted, which she handled with impressive calm. Just another day at the office. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Walter had a breakthrough. "Wait a minute," he said, snapping his fingers. "What if we use its own fiction against it?" Rico, halfway through turning a wrench into a small potted plant, paused. "Say more." "Think about it," Walter explained. "If it can make fiction real, maybe we can use that to our advantage. We just have to out-fiction it." Morgan looked intrigued. You mean create something within its parameters that can counteract its effects? Exactly, Walter said. It's like fighting fire with fire, except the fire is a reality-warping alien gizmo. The captain nodded, her enthusiasm infectious. All right, Rigby, let's do it. What do you need? Paper, pens, and every ridiculous scenario you can think of, Walter replied. And so the team set to work, scribbling down wild ideas and improbable solutions, brainstorming a story that would, with any luck, turn the tide in their favor. Elsewhere, Zintak watched with a mix of horror and admiration. They're writing it down, he marveled. They're actually using fiction to combat the fiction transmuter. His companion made a noise somewhere between a sigh and a groan. Humans? Indeed, Zintak agreed, unable to suppress a smile. They never cease to surprise. Back at the colony, Walter and his team put the finishing touches on their plan. It was a story cobbled together from bits and pieces of popular culture and wild imagination, with just enough belief to make it work hopefully. Taking a deep breath, Walter approached the artifact, his makeshift script in hand. The artifact seemed to pulse, almost as if it were anticipating their move. Here goes nothing, Walter said, and began to read aloud. The room fell silent as he spoke, each word carrying an air of possibility, each sentence a thread woven into the tapestry of fiction and reality. Around him, the others held their breath, waiting to see if this gambit would pay off or if they'd be stuck in a loop of bizarre transformations indefinitely. Zintak watched intently, his eyes wide with fascination. This is it, he murmured to himself. The moment of truth. As Walter finished, there was a pause, a stillness that seemed to stretch out into infinity. Then the artifact began to glow brighter, its hum reaching a crescendo before abruptly cutting off. The room was plunged into silence, the kind of silence that makes you wonder if your ears are still working. For a moment, no one dared move, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop, but nothing happened. No glitches, no transformations, no random musical numbers. Just normality. Well, I'll be damned, Rico said, breaking the silence. I think it worked. Captain Morgan exhaled, a relieved smile spreading across her face. Nice work, Rigby. You might just have saved our asses. Walter shrugged, trying to play it cool despite the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. All in a day's work, right? Zintak watched with a sense of fulfillment, perhaps even a touch of pride. They did it, he said to his companion, who looked as if he might just crack a smile. I didn't think they could, but they did. The council would be pleased. Or not. Who really cared? For now, the humans had survived another day, proving once more that they were masters of chaos and creativity, capable of finding their way through even the most tangled webs of fiction and reality. As Walter and his team celebrated their small victory, he couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of it all. A lunar colony, an alien artifact, and a group of misfits using stories to save the day. It was, in its own way, a perfect encapsulation of the human spirit. Messy, unpredictable, and utterly remarkable. Walter Rigby was having one of those days that made him long for the good old times when the biggest problem on the lunar colony was the dodgy generator that had more tantrums than a toddler in a candy store. At least then, he knew the rules of engagement. Kick it until it worked or blew up. Simple. Now, the rules were more like guidelines that had been scribbled in crayon by a particularly drunk philosopher. The artifact was laughing at him. Metaphorically, of course, but if it sprouted a mouth and started cackling, he wouldn't be too surprised. Its latest trick had turned Colonel Sanders, who had been minding his own business, trying to fix a comms relay, into a 12-foot-tall inflatable chicken. The kind you'd find outside a fast food joint trying to entice you in for a cheap meal. Only this one was clucking out the Russian national anthem. Because why not? Captain Jane No-Nonsense Morgan didn't have time for this nonsense, despite what her nickname might suggest. She had a colony to run, and that meant finding solutions, not excuses. She stormed into the control room, her expression suggesting heads were about to roll if things didn't start improving, preferably yesterday. Walter, she barked, her voice expertly slicing through the cacophony of chaos. If I don't get those systems stable by sundown, I'm tossing you out of the nearest airlock. Noted, Walter replied, not looking up from the console. I'd love to help, but I'm a bit busy trying not to conjure up a unicorn parade. She raised an eyebrow. Unicorns? Could be worse, he said, shrugging. Could be dinosaurs. Fine, she replied, rubbing her temples. Just fix it. Walter's relationship with the artifact was complicated. He didn't want to touch it, let alone fix it. You don't fix things that you don't understand unless you want a master's degree in how to get eaten by alien technology. As if sensing his reluctance, the artifact glowed ominously, and Walter swore it was mocking him in some ancient alien tongue. Or maybe it was Klingon. Who could tell anymore? A wrench in his toolbox turned into something slimy and tentacled, and he decided to ignore that particular development for the moment. Best not to provoke it. Rico, still sporting his charming donkey ears, stumbled over, carrying what used to be a clipboard but now looked suspiciously like an oversized lollipop. He didn't seem to mind. So, any bright ideas, genius? I was thinking, Walter said, maybe we should just pretend everything is fine and see if it goes away. Brave, Rico snorted. But maybe not the most practical plan. You got a better one. Rico paused, scratching his head and making his donkey ears flop comically. Well, we could try finding a way to sync the colony systems to some kind of stable baseline. Use the artifact's own meddling to stabilize everything else. You're suggesting we turn the artifact into an anchor for our systems? Walter asked, trying to wrap his head around it. Why not? It's already screwing everything up. Maybe we can make it screw things up in a more predictable way. Walter considered this. It was insane, sure, but a certain kind of insane that might just work. It was like juggling chainsaws to keep them from exploding dangerous, but at least then they'd have a rhythm. Okay, Walter said, his mind racing. We need to isolate its energy output, focus it, and then use it to overwrite the colony's mainframe, leaving it to do what it does best, Rico finished. Random chaos, but on our terms. Somewhere in the colony, a vending machine went berserk, spewing out cans of soda like a fizzy waterfall. Walter squinted at the artifact, which had started shimmering with what looked like dark glee. All right, let's give it a shot. What have we got to lose? Besides our sanity and possibly our lives, Rico joked. Exactly, Walter replied. So, nothing we haven't put on the line before. As they got to work, Captain Morgan oversaw the chaos with her trademark scowl of determination. She wasn't the type to back down from a fight, even if it was against reality itself. Besides, there was a certain thrill in going toe-to-toe with the unknown, if only it didn't come with the risk of turning into a balloon animal. In the observation chamber, Zintak was having the time of his life, or whatever it was called when you were a gelatinous alien watching humans make a mess of things. He turned to his companion, who was still grumbling about the humans' penchant for chaos. They're doing it, Zintak said, almost impressed. They're turning the whole mess into a less messy mess. You think they'll manage to contain it? His companion asked, sounding skeptical. Who knows, Zintak replied. That's the fun of it, isn't it? Back on the lunar colony, Walter and Rico were knee-deep in wires and circuits, trying to connect the unpredictable power of the artifact to the colony's systems. It was like trying to harness a tornado, but they were nothing if not determined. Captain Morgan tapped her foot impatiently, watching the chaos unfold around her. The artifact was still playing its games, flicking in and out of sight like a mischievous ghost. You sure about this, Rigby? Walter grunted as he fumbled with another wire. Sure as I'll ever be, which in this case means not at all. Comforting, Morgan replied dryly. Think of it this way, Walter said, flashing a grin. It works, we save the colony. It doesn't, and we get a new crater to name after us, Morgan snorted. I'll start thinking of a name. The work was grueling, but the idea was solid. They'd use the artifact's own chaotic energy to power the colony's systems, effectively turning its instability into a stabilizing force. It was genius if he did say so himself, or incredibly stupid. The line between the two was often very thin. "Ready?" Walter asked, wiping sweat from his brow and watching it float away in the low gravity like a tiny, rebellious cloud. "As I'll ever be," Rico replied, giving a thumbs up. Walter took a deep breath, steadying himself. "All right, here goes nothing." He flipped the switch and they held their collective breaths, waiting for the colony to either stabilize or implode. The lights flickered, the walls hummed with energy, and for a moment everything seemed to hang in the balance. Walter's heart thudded painfully in his chest, echoing the rhythmic pulse of the artifact as it did, whatever it was doing. Then, as if by some miracle or exceptionally bad joke of the universe, the chaos began to subside. The vending machine stopped vomiting soda, Colonel Sanders shrank back to human size, and the PA system finally went silent, much to everyone's relief. "We did it," Walter breathed, hardly daring to believe it. "We're not dead." "Yet," Rico added, ever the optimist. Captain Morgan let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "Good work, Rigby. I knew you had it in you." "Thanks, Captain," he replied, feeling a surge of pride. "Though I wouldn't call it a fix, more like a temporary reprieve." "Temporary is fine," she said with a shrug. "We'll take what we can get." As the dust settled, or floated in this case, the colony started to look less like a madhouse and more like the semi-functional outpost it was meant to be. Sure, there were still inflatable chickens and donkey-eared crew members, but Walter figured that was just part of the charm now. In the observation chamber, Zintak watched the humans triumph with a sense of satisfaction. They'd managed to wrangle chaos to their advantage, a feat that few species could claim. It was reckless, dangerous, and incredibly human. "They did it," Zintak said, turning to his companion. His companion nodded, finally conceding a hint of admiration. "Against all odds." "Indeed," Zintak replied. "They're nothing if not resourceful." Back on the colony, Walter took a moment to savor their small victory. They'd managed to survive another day, and that was something. Even if tomorrow brought more chaos, they'd face it head-on, just like always. For now, though, there was work to be done. The generator still needed fixing, and there were systems to reboot and inventories to restock. Life on the colony never stopped, after all, but they were alive and kicking mostly. "Think you'll miss the chaos?" Rico asked, as they began tidying up the aftermath. "Maybe a little," Walter admitted. "Keeps things interesting. Plus, the artifact's still here," Rico pointed out, nodding at the pulsating object at the center of their troubles. "True," Walter said with a grin. "Who knows what it's got in store for us next?" Captain Morgan clapped Walter on the back. "Whatever it is, we'll handle it. We've got the best team for the job, after all." "Damn right," Walter agreed. As they set about restoring order to the colony, Walter couldn't help but feel a sense of camaraderie with his fellow misfits. They'd faced down chaos and come out stronger, proving once again that, when it came to humans, even the universe couldn't predict what they'd do next. And somewhere deep down in the artifact's alien core, Walter liked to think it respected them for it, if only just a little. Inside the observation chamber, Zintak jiggled like a bowl of sentient jello, emitting a sound that could generously be called a sigh, or maybe a snort. Alien physiology wasn't his strong suit. His companion, Tizor, looked like a water balloon that had been left out in the sun too long, not the most flattering of comparisons, but then again, neither of them were here to win beauty contests. "We've underestimated the artifact's influence," Tizor rumbled, voice like gravel tumbling down a hill. "The humans are playing with fire, and they're stubborn enough to keep on poking it. More than just poking," Zintak muttered. "They've practically invited it to dinner and given it a seat at the head of the table." Tizor shifted, the alien equivalent of an uncomfortable cough. "The council wants it retrieved. We can't have them destabilizing this entire sector with their creative applications of chaos." Zintak turned his attention back to the screens displaying the lunar colony's antics. Humans were peculiar creatures, audacious in their stupidity, yet somehow admirable in their relentless audacity. "You think they'd just hand it over if we asked nicely?" More likely they'd use it to turn us into a circus act and charge admission, Tizor grumbled. No, we need to retrieve it quietly before they figure out just how dangerous it really is. Zintak winced, an odd, gelatinous shudder. Right, because sneaking around on their colony has worked so well in the past. Unbeknownst to the aliens, Walter was locked in a particularly frustrating game of how do I not die today with the artifact. Armed with little more than a spanner and a prayer, he examined the pulsating menace that had, not too long ago, turned Colonel Sanders into a poultry parade float. Next time, he mused, he'd vote for a planet with fewer existential threats and more sunbathing opportunities. Rico, ever the optimist, was tinkering nearby. You know, I read somewhere that in a parallel universe we're probably sipping margaritas on a beach right now. Yeah. In this universe, we're one wrong move away from sipping our own teeth, Walter replied, eyes glued to the artifact as it shimmered with unsettling intent. Rico twirled his donkey ears, an unfortunate souvenir from one of the artifact's previous whims. You ever wonder why it does what it does? Every damn day, Walter admitted. At this point, I half expected to do the Macarena. A thought occurred as he watched the artifact's erratic glow. What if it's not just random? What do you mean? Rico asked, eyebrows arching upwards. What if it's pulling things from other realities? You know, parallel universes where fiction is real. Rico blinked, processing the idea. So, like, if I read a book about flying pigs, this thing could make it happen. Exactly, Walter said. And considering the trash novels I've read, that's terrifying. Meanwhile, Captain Morgan was dealing with the latest catastrophe, a fridge that decided it was an opera singer. As it belted out an off-key rendition of a classic aria, she sighed heavily. I didn't sign up for this when I took command. If I wanted chaos, I'd have stayed on Earth. Could be worse, Walter called over, not looking up. We could be dealing with an alien invasion. Morgan shot him a withering look. Don't jinx it. Back in the observation chamber, Zintak and Tizor watched the chaos unfold with a mix of dread and reluctant respect. Humans are remarkably resilient, Zintak observed. They're like cockroaches. Unkillable, adaptable, and they just keep on going. Charming analogy, Tizor replied. But you're not wrong. We need to act before they figure out how to harness the artifact's power intentionally. Assuming they don't blow themselves up first, Zintak said dryly. Think we should intervene? Tizor pondered this for a moment. If we swoop in now, we risk drawing attention. No, we wait until they're distracted enough to slip in unnoticed. Zintak nodded, though he wasn't entirely convinced of the plan's likelihood of success. Humans and their unpredictable nature were a constant variable, one that made calculations difficult and predictions even more so. Back on the colony, Walter and Rico were busy piecing together the tantalizing possibility that the artifact was more than just a chaotic nuisance. It might be a bridge to other worlds, other realities. The implications were staggering and a little terrifying. You think we should tell Morgan? Rico asked, adjusting his donkey ears yet again. Tell her what? Walter replied. That we've got a device that could potentially unravel the fabric of reality as we know it. Good point. As they delved deeper into their findings, Morgan entered the room, arms folded and a scowl etched on her face. What's the latest, Rigby? Walter gave her a quick rundown of their hypothesis. To her credit, Morgan didn't laugh or dismiss them outright. Instead, she listened patiently, nodding in all the right places. So what you're saying is we might be sitting on a device that could open up the multiverse like a can of cosmic worms, she asked. Pretty much, Walter replied. Fantastic, Morgan said, rubbing her temples. Just what I needed, another reason to lose sleep. Hey, look on the bright side, Rico interjected. At least we're not bored. Morgan chuckled despite herself. True. I'd take this over dealing with bureaucratic nonsense any day. They were interrupted by a sudden commotion outside. A group of crew members, led by the recently deflated Colonel Sanders, were running toward them, panic etched on their faces. Boss, Sanders yelled. We've got a situation. Define situation, Morgan said, already dreading the answer. There's a thing, Sanders said, gesturing wildly. Big, shiny, and it's blocking our comms. Thing, Walter repeated. Could you be more specific? Could be aliens, Rico suggested, not entirely joking. Aliens in this economy, Walter quipped. They'd better bring snacks, Morgan rolled her eyes. Let's check it out. Together they raced to the comms center where an enormous, shimmering sphere hovered in the air. It pulsed with energy, casting erratic shadows across the room. Well, that's new, Walter remarked, trying and failing to sound nonchalant. Rico gaped at it. You think it's connected to the artifact? Wouldn't that be our luck? Walter said, rubbing his chin. Morgan frowned at the sphere, instinctively reaching for her sidearm, though what good it would do against a mysterious energy blob she didn't know. Can we communicate with it? Before anyone could respond, the sphere emitted a low hum and a holographic image flickered to life in the center, Zintac looking decidedly uncomfortable. Ah, Walter said, this is new. Zintac's image flickered uncertainly. Greetings, humans, I am Zintac, emissary of the Council. Great, Morgan muttered. More aliens. We come in peace, Zintac continued, clearly struggling to maintain a diplomatic tone. But we must discuss the artifact. Morgan crossed her arms, unimpressed. You mean the source of all our recent headaches? Precisely, Zintac replied. Its power is significant, and it poses a danger to your colony and beyond. Walter exchanged a look with Rico. You mean to say we've been sitting on a ticking time bomb? In a manner of speaking, yes, Zintac admitted, looking more like a guilty gelatin dessert by the second. Well, that's just great, Morgan said sarcastically. So, what's the plan? You lot come in, clean up our mess, and leave us to deal with the fallout. Not exactly, Zintac said. We intend to retrieve the artifact before it causes irreparable damage. Isn't that nice? Walter remarked. And here I thought we were just getting to be friends. The hologram of Zintac wobbled slightly. I assure you we mean no harm, but we cannot allow the artifact to remain unchecked. Morgan considered this. Fine, you can take it. But if you screw us over, I swear I'll find a way to make you regret it. Zintac's holographic form nodded, and with that the sphere retracted, leaving the room in stunned silence. Well, Rico said, breaking the quiet. That was something, Walter agreed. And we thought things couldn't get any weirder. Morgan unclenched her jaw, still buzzing from the encounter. All right, let's figure out how to hand this thing over without blowing ourselves up. As they began to formulate a plan, Walter wondered if this would be the last of their troubles. Somehow, he doubted it. Chaos was as much a part of life on the lunar colony as low gravity and bad coffee. But hey, at least they weren't bored. In the observation chamber, Zintac and Tizor watched the proceedings with anticipation. The plan was simple: retrieve the artifact, minimize collateral damage, and hope the humans didn't discover too many interdimensional secrets in the process. Do you think they suspect the true power of the artifact? Tizor asked, his tone as dry as the lunar surface. If they do, they are doing a good job of hiding it, Zintac replied. But knowing humans, they'll probably stumble onto the truth before long. They always do, Tizor said with a resigned sigh. Let's hope they don't blow up the universe before we can intervene. Zintac nodded, watching as the humans prepared to relinquish the artifact. It was risky, unpredictable, and fraught with potential disaster. Just another day in the universe, really. Back on the colony, as Walter and his crew worked to transfer the artifact, he couldn't help but feel a strange mix of relief and trepidation. They were handing over something powerful, something dangerous, and trusting aliens to handle it with care. It wasn't exactly comforting, but then again, comfort was a luxury few could afford out here. At least they'd live to tackle another day, another crisis, and another round of absurdity. As the artifact was handed over, Walter couldn't resist a final jab at the universe's sense of humor. Well, here's to new beginnings and fewer chicken balloons. Rico chuckled. You think that's the last we'll see of it? Not a chance, Walter replied, grinning. But hey, when has that ever stopped us? Captain Morgan watched the exchange with a mix of pride and exasperation. Her crew was nothing if not resilient, and they'd come through yet another crisis with their spirits intact, mostly. For now, they'd focus on the next challenge, the next mystery, and the next impossible task. Because in the grand scheme of things, what else could you do but laugh in the face of chaos? And somewhere, in the depths of the universe, the artifact hummed with a knowing glimmer, as if amused by the humans' determination to tackle whatever came next. The lunar colony wasn't exactly a vacation spot before, but now, it was less Club Med and more Dante's Inferno with a side of bad plumbing. The artifact, that fickle piece of cosmic nonsense, had started throwing its weight around, tugging at the fabric of reality like a toddler with a new toy. It had escalated from turning people into poultry and singing refrigerators to something potentially more catastrophic, like ripping holes in the space-time continuum. Walter Rigby, armed with his trusty spanner and a grimace that could curdle milk, was knee-deep in the latest mess. He adjusted his cracked helmet, all the better for the low-gravity sweat to stick to his brow and give him that extra layer of discomfort. "I suppose it's fitting," he muttered to himself, "that the end of the world would find me elbow-deep in a generator that's one well-placed kick away from a catastrophic meltdown." Rico, ever the optimist despite sporting a pair of donkey ears courtesy of the artifact, was fiddling with a mess of wires like a child with a particularly stubborn puzzle. "Cheer up, Walter. At least we're not being pelted by meteors today," Walter snorted. "Give it time. With our luck, the artifact will start spewing them out of the canteen along with the mystery meat." Meanwhile, Captain Jane No-Nonsense Morgan was trying to keep the chaos from spilling over like a poorly timed soufflé. The artifact's effects had escalated the situation from manageable headache to existential nightmare in record time. She glared at the chaos around her, hands on her hips, looking like she was ready to headbutt the universe into submission. "All right, folks," Morgan called out, her voice equal parts command and exasperation. "We've got a situation that makes a dumpster fire look like a birthday candle." "Suggestions?" Colonel Sanders, still recovering from his stint as an inflatable chicken, raised a hand, looking sheepish yet determined. "We could try reasoning with it," Walter chuckled darkly. "Sure, why not? Maybe it'll offer us a cup of tea and a biscuit while it's at it." Morgan shot him a look sharp enough to slice through steel. "Let's focus on solutions that don't involve sarcasm, shall we?" "Fine," Walter grumbled. "But sarcasm is about the only thing keeping me sane at this point." As they debated, the observation chamber was alive with the sound of alien perplexity. Zintac, still resembling sentient jello, hovered in front of the holographic display, monitoring the increasingly unstable situation on the colony with T-Zor at his side. "I'm starting to question the wisdom of our involvement," Zintac said, his voice a smooth blend of regret and apprehension. T-Zor, looking like a sun-damaged water balloon, bobbed in agreement. "These humans are fascinating, but perhaps we underestimated their capacity for chaos." "Underestimate?" Zintac scoffed. "We didn't just underestimate it, we missed it by a cosmic mile. If they keep poking that artifact, we might end up with a multiverse on our hands. Or worse," T-Zor added ominously, "a multiverse where they win." Zintac shuddered at the thought. "Intervening might draw attention, but if we don't step in soon, we might be dealing with something far worse than a few human mishaps." Back on the moon, Morgan was dealing with another mishap of her own. The artifact was now emitting a low hum that set her teeth on edge, a sound that seemed to unnerve the very air. "Rico, Walter, anything you can do to shut that thing up?" Walter shrugged, tossing his spanner from hand to hand like a juggler with a penchant for danger. "We could try kicking it." Rico, ever the optimist, squinted at the artifact with a thoughtful expression. "We might need to recalibrate its energy output, or maybe reverse its polarity." Walter rolled his eyes. "Ah, the old reverse the polarity trick. When in doubt, baffle it with science." "Got any better ideas?" Rico challenged. Yeah, Walter said sarcastically. Let's just ask it nicely to stop trying to destroy reality, Morgan groaned. Less sarcasm, more solutions, gentlemen. As the artifact's hum intensified, reality itself seemed to buckle under the pressure, like a cheap knockoff belt under a particularly ambitious waistline. Colors began to bleed together, and shadows danced in ways that suggested a total disregard for physics. It was all so absurd that if it hadn't been happening right in front of them, Walter would have thought it was the punchline to an elaborate joke. "We need to move," Morgan barked, pulling the crew back from the edge of madness. "Now, before this thing decides to rewrite history as we know it." They scrambled to follow her lead, ducking and weaving through the disorienting landscape the artifact was creating, a swirling mess of corridors that led nowhere and everywhere simultaneously. Walter, never one to pass up a chance to grumble, muttered under his breath, "And to think I could have been an accountant." Rico, struggling to keep up, let out a breathless laugh. "And miss out on all this. Where's your sense of adventure?" "Probably the same place I left my self-preservation instinct," Walter shot back, dodging a flickering shadow that looked alarmingly sentient. Meanwhile, back in the observation chamber, Zintak was having a moment of existential crisis. "We're supposed to be the advanced species, Tzor. How do we always end up playing catch-up with these humans?" Tzor pondered this, his bulbous features reflecting the glow of the screens around them. Perhaps their unpredictability is their greatest strength. Or maybe it's just plain dumb luck. Luck or not, we need to act, Zintak decided, his resolve firming like cooling gelatin, before they accidentally invent a new form of chaos. Back on the moon, the humans were scrambling to regain some semblance of control. The artifact's hum had reached a crescendo, a symphony of discord that threatened to tear them apart at the seams. As the walls shifted and reality twisted, Morgan made a split-second decision. "Walter, Rico, we need to isolate that thing, cut off its power source," she commanded, her voice a lifeline in the chaos. Walter nodded, adrenaline sharpening his focus. "You got it, Captain." "Let's hope this works and doesn't just speed up doomsday." Rico was already on it, his fingers a blur as he worked to sever the artifact's connection to the colony's power grid. "If we can just there," he exclaimed triumphantly, yanking a particularly stubborn cable free. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then the artifact's hum sputtered and died, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. "We did it?" Walter asked, disbelief coloring his voice. Morgan nodded, relief mingling with the weariness in her eyes. "For now, but we're not out of the woods yet. More like the dense thicket of cosmic insanity," Walter quipped, though his grin was genuine. The moment of calm was short-lived, however. The colony might have been saved from one disaster, but the aftermath was a tangled mess of shattered corridors and frayed nerves. As they surveyed the damage, Morgan's shoulders slumped with the weight of the task ahead. "Let's get this place back in order, folks," she said, trying to muster a cheerfulness she didn't quite feel. "There's a lot of work to do and not much time to do it," Walter sighed, tucking his spanner back into his belt. "We always seem to be cleaning up messes, don't we?" Rico chuckled, nudging him playfully. "Hey, at least we get to do it together." "True," Walter agreed, his grin returning. "Though next time, maybe we can tackle something a bit more straightforward, like a plague of locusts or a meteor shower." As the crew dispersed to begin the long process of repairs, Zintak and Tzor watched from their observation chamber, their expressions a mixture of relief and admiration. "Well," Tzor said, "it seems they've managed to avoid utter catastrophe once again. But for how long?" Zintak wondered. "The artifact is still a ticking time bomb. We need to ensure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands, especially their own." "Agreed," Tzor said, nodding. "But as long as they have people like Captain Morgan and her crew, I'm inclined to believe they might just pull through." Zintak hummed in agreement, his gelatinous form undulating gently. "Let's hope so. For all our sakes." Back on the lunar colony, Walter and his team were hard at work, their banter a steady undercurrent to the task at hand. Despite the chaos and uncertainty, there was a camaraderie that bound them together, a shared determination to fight through whatever the universe threw their way. No one said it would be easy, Morgan remarked as she joined Walter and Rico, her presence a reassuring anchor amidst the madness. Easy's overrated, Walter replied, offering her a lopsided smile. Besides, where's the fun in that? Rico laughed, clapping Walter on the back. Here's to our next adventure, whatever it may be. As the humans set to work rebuilding, Zintak and Tizor continued their vigilant watch, ever mindful of the artifact's potential to disrupt and destroy. But for now, at least, the humans had weathered the storm, a testament to their tenacity, resilience, and a healthy dose of stubbornness. In the grand scheme of things, it was just another day on the lunar colony, a place where chaos reigned supreme, reality was subjective, and adventure was always just a heartbeat away. As Walter often said, when life gives you lemons, you might as well make moonshine. And on this colony, there was always plenty of moonshine to go around. Walter Rigby stood, spanner in hand, in the middle of the lunar colony's chaos, which was currently doing a stellar impression of a Salvador Dali painting on a bad acid trip. The artifact loomed nearby, a floating enigma with the uncanny ability to twist reality like a pretzel. Walter kicked a fragment of debris out of his path, muttering, "I swear, if it weren't for this artifact, this place would be a regular paradise of dust and despair." Captain Jane No-Nonsense Morgan was barking orders, her voice a welcome contrast to the cacophony of reality tearing itself apart. "Focus, people. We're not out of this yet." "Best pep talk I've heard all day," Walter mumbled, adjusting his grip on his trusty spanner. He glanced at the artifact, a swirling mass of cosmic nonsense that had the gall to hum at him like a smug refrigerator. "All right, you oversized kaleidoscope, time to show me your secrets." Beside him, Rico, with his perpetually optimistic donkey ears twitching, was fiddling with a bundle of wires that seemed to change colors with every breath. "Hey, Walter," Rico said, grinning, "I think I found something interesting here." "You mean aside from the fact we're all one misstep away from becoming sentient pudding?" Walter replied, his sarcasm as sharp as the edge of Morgan's patience. Rico snorted. "No, really, look at this." He held up a tangled mess of cables which, to the untrained eye, looked like a bird's nest after a bender. Walter squinted at the mess, then at the artifact. The gears in his brain, usually content to coast on sarcasm and caffeine, started turning. "Wait a minute," he said slowly. "You thinking what I'm thinking? That we need a vacation?" Rico offered. Walter shook his head. "No, something better. What if we can use this thing's power instead of just trying to shut it down? You know, fight fire with fire, or in this case, nonsense with more nonsense." "Interesting theory, Walter," Rico mused, scratching an ear with a contemplative look. "But how exactly do we do that without turning ourselves into yesterday's leftovers?" Walter grinned, a slightly manic glint in his eyes. "Simple. We improvise." "And I thought I was the optimist," Rico muttered, but there was a spark of excitement in his voice. Meanwhile, in the observation chamber, Zintak and Tizor were having their own moral conundrum. The monitors showed the lunar colony's precarious dance with disaster. The humans were scrambling, improvising, doing what they did best, winging it. "We really should intervene," Zintak said, watching Walter and Rico's antics with a mix of horror and admiration. Tizor bobbed uncertainly. "Against the Council's orders, that's risky." "Risky? These humans redefine risky on a daily basis," Zintak retorted. "But damn it, Tizor, they're making something of it." "Maybe it's time we stopped being spectators and started helping." Tizor hesitated, his gelatinous form quivering with indecision. "Intervening might expose us. Or it might save them," Zintak countered. "And frankly, if they survive this, I wouldn't mind them owing us a favor." Tizor pondered this, then nodded. "All right. What do you propose?" Back on the colony, Walter was busy channeling his inner mad scientist. "Okay, Rico, we need to create a feedback loop. Use the artifact's energy to stabilize the colony, not destroy it. Rico nodded, his fingers flying over the makeshift control panel they'd cobbled together from spare parts and a healthy disregard for safety standards. You think it'll work? Don't know, Walter admitted, but it's either that or start planning how to live as a cosmic dust mite. Just then, a holographic image of Zintac flickered into existence. Humans, he said, his tone an odd mix of urgency and awkward camaraderie. I believe I can assist you with that. Walter blinked. Great, now the Jello-S talking to us. What's next? The walls start singing. Zintac ignored the jibe. I can temporarily stabilize the artifact's energy field, giving you enough time to execute your plan. And why would you help us? Morgan asked, warily eyeing the hologram. Because, Zintac said, I'd rather not see your reality implode. Also, you humans keep things interesting. Walter smirked. Interesting is one way to put it. All right, Zintac, let's see what you've got. As Zintac worked his alien magic, Walter and Rico scrambled to reroute the artifact's power through the colony's generator. The plan was audacious, reckless, and had about a snowball's chance in hell of working, just the way Walter liked it. The room filled with a tension so thick you could slice it with a spanner. The artifact's hum changed pitch, from ominous to something resembling begrudging cooperation. Sparks flew, lights flickered, and somewhere, a panel exploded in a shower of sparks for dramatic effect. Almost there, Rico shouted over the noise, his eyes wide with adrenaline and a touch of madness. Walter tightened a final bolt, his fingers a blur of mechanical dexterity. Now, Rico. Rico slammed his hand down on a makeshift lever, and for a moment the world held its breath. Time seemed to slow, and Walter found himself wondering if this was it, the end, or something entirely different. The artifact pulsed, a shockwave of energy rippling through the room. Walter braced himself for the worst, but instead of catastrophe there was nothing. Just a profound silence, the kind that felt like the universe itself had stopped to consider its next move. Did it work? Rico asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Walter looked around, half expecting to find himself transformed into a cabbage or something equally surreal. But no, he was still himself, and more importantly, the colony was still intact. I'll be damned, Walter said, breathless. It actually worked. Morgan let out a shaky laugh, relief washing over her features. Looks like the universe decided to give us a break for once. Zintac's hologram flickered, his expression unreadable. A most unorthodox success, but effective. Walter grinned, a wide, triumphant smile. Never underestimate human ingenuity, he said, clapping Rico on the back. Or our capacity for winging it. As the crew began to take stock of the situation, Morgan turned to Walter, her expression softening. Nice work, Rigby, she said, with more warmth than usual. Walter shrugged, trying and failing to hide his satisfaction. Just another day at the office, Captain. Tizor's voice crackled over the communication channel, tinged with something like respect. You humans are full of surprises. We shall continue to monitor and support your efforts discreetly, of course. Appreciated, Morgan replied, casting a wary glance at the still dormant artifact. Let's just hope we don't have to do anything like this again. Walter chuckled, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Oh, come on, where's the fun in that? Rico laughed, his optimism infectious. Here's to more adventures and less disaster. As the crew set about the monumental task of cleanup and repair, Walter couldn't help but feel a strange sense of optimism creeping in alongside his usual cynicism. Maybe it was the euphoria of not being dead, or maybe it was the knowledge that, for once, they'd managed to not just survive but thrive in the face of overwhelming odds. Still, as Zintac and Tizor watched from the observation chamber, it was clear that the artifact was a double-edged sword. While the immediate crisis had been averted, its potential for chaos remained, a lurking threat that could resurface at any moment. But for now, at least, the humans had a moment of respite, a chance to catch their breath and prepare for whatever cosmic curveball the universe might throw their way next. As Walter often said, when life gives you a reality-warping artifact, you might as well see what it can do for you. With any luck, they'd figure it out before the damned thing decided to turn them all into cosmic soup. And in that moment, surrounded by the aftermath of madness and the camaraderie of survivors, it seemed like they just might stand a chance. Walter Rigby stood in the shattered remnants of the lunar colony, surrounded by the kind of chaos that made him question his career choices. The artifact, a swirling mass of cosmic nonsense, floated nearby, humming away like it was trying out for the Galactic Symphony. If Walter had learned anything in his time in this makeshift hellhole, it was that when reality decided to play jazz, the best you could do was improvise. "Well, Walter," he muttered to himself, "you've got a sentient jello offering help, a colony on the brink of becoming a smear on the universe's windshield, and a spanner. What could possibly go wrong?" Rico was still buzzing with energy, his donkey ears twitching with every crackle of the artifact. "Hey, Walter, got any bright ideas on how we use this thing without, becoming cosmic roadkill?" "Working on it," Walter replied, squinting at the artifact as if it might suddenly reveal its secrets like a shy stripper. "Zintac, you still there, or did you decide to ghost us?" The holographic image of Zintac flickered to life, his gelatinous form bobbing with an air of bemused urgency. "I am here, Walter, and I must say your tenacity is commendable if not slightly insane." Walter grinned. "Insanity's just another word for dedication, my friend. Now, about that reality manipulation trick you mentioned. How exactly do we pull it off without turning into a breakfast special at the Cosmic Diner?" Zintac paused, his form shifting like a lava lamp caught in an existential crisis. "The artifact responds to intent. Your human imagination, chaotic as it is, can guide its energy, but you must be precise. Imprecision here means unintended consequences." "Great, so it's like trying to defuse a bomb while blindfolded and wearing mittens," Walter replied, scratching his chin. "Got it." Captain Jane No-Nonsense Morgan, ever the pragmatist, crossed her arms. "Let's not dance around it. We need to neutralize the artifact, or at least make it our ally. And by we, I mean you, Rigby. You're the one with the spanner." "Right," Walter said, eyeing the artifact with a mixture of trepidation and reckless curiosity. "Rico, you still got those wires handy?" Rico tossed him a tangled mess of cables, his eyes gleaming with the kind of thrill only a lunatic or a genius could muster. "Got them. Let's show this artifact who's boss." As Walter began connecting the wires to the artifact, he couldn't help but think of the irony. Here he was, trying to control a piece of cosmic chaos with a few scraps of wire and a prayer to whatever deity might be listening. It was absurd, and yet, for some reason, it felt just right. "Okay, Zintac, what's next?" Walter asked, his hands moving with a deftness born of desperation and caffeine. "Focus your thoughts on a desired outcome," Zintac instructed, his voice serene despite the chaos. "The artifact will respond to your will," Walter snorted. "Wish I'd known about this back in college. Could have aced all those exams by thinking about margaritas on a beach." "Less reminiscing, more concentrating, Rigby," Morgan interjected, her tone sharp enough to cut through the tension. "Right, right," Walter said, shaking his head to clear the cobwebs of cynicism. He closed his eyes, trying to summon an image of the colony stabilized. The chaos reigned in, and most importantly, everyone in one piece. The artifact pulsed, its energy swirling around him like a disco ball on steroids. At first, nothing happened, just the same oppressive silence, the kind that made you wonder if you'd finally pushed your luck too far. Then slowly, a change began to ripple through the colony. The air shimmered, reality bending like it was made of rubber. Walter felt a strange warmth spreading through his veins, a sensation that was equal parts exhilarating and terrifying. Walter," Rico said, his voice tinged with awe, "you might want to open your eyes." Walter did, and what he saw made him blink in disbelief. Where there had been chaos, there was now order, of a sort. The walls, previously twisted and distorted, stood firm. The floors, once a treacherous labyrinth, were flat and stable. "Well, I'll be damned," Walter said, a slow grin spreading across his face. Looks like we pulled it off. Morgan let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. I didn't think it was possible, but somehow you've managed to make the impossible look possible. Zintak's hologram flickered, his gelatinous form more animated than ever. Your creativity is remarkable. Truly, the potential of human imagination is a force to be reckoned with. Yeah, we're pretty good at winging it, Walter replied, a gleam of satisfaction in his eyes. That and finding new ways to not die, Rico added with a chuckle. As the crew began to assess the extent of their unexpected success, Tzor chimed in over the communication channel, his voice a blend of curiosity and caution. Your actions have averted immediate disaster, but the artifact remains unpredictable. Continued vigilance is required. Morgan nodded, her expression one of determination. Agreed. This isn't over yet. We need to monitor it closely and ensure it doesn't revert back to its chaotic tendencies. Walter glanced at the artifact, which seemed to be resting peacefully now, its energy subdued yet still potent. So, it's like keeping a pet tiger. Cute to look at but liable to bite your head off if you get too close. An apt analogy, Tzor replied, his tone as dry as a Martian summer. Zintak's hologram shimmered, a thoughtful expression crossing his gelatinous face. Perhaps there is potential here for collaboration. Your ingenuity combined with our understanding of the artifact could yield interesting results. Interesting's one word for it, Walter said, giving the artifact a wary look. But sure, as long as interesting doesn't turn into catastrophic. Agreed, Zintak said, his tone settling into a more measured cadence. The Council will need to be informed, but for now we remain allies in this endeavor. Walter and Rico exchanged a glance, the camaraderie of shared insanity uniting them. Looks like we're not alone in this after all, Rico mused, his optimism shining through. Never thought I'd say it, Walter replied, but having a sentient jello and a sun-damaged water balloon on our side might just be the best thing that's happened to us. As the crew worked to secure the colony and assess the damage, a newfound sense of hope began to seep through the cracks of their cynicism. They'd faced down a cosmic enigma, and through sheer audacity and a touch of insanity, they'd come out on top. Walter, ever the realist, knew that this was just the beginning. The artifact was a wild card, a reminder that the universe was filled with mysteries that defied logic. But for now, in this moment, they'd managed to wrangle the chaos into something resembling order. And as he stood there, battered but unbowed, Walter couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, they were on the brink of something extraordinary. Of course, knowing his luck, it was probably just the calm before the next storm, but that was a problem for tomorrow. Today, they had survived, and in the grimdark depths of space, that was a victory worth celebrating. "Hey, Walter," Rico called, his voice carrying a note of mischief. "Think the Council's gonna give us a bonus for saving their skins?" Walter chuckled, shaking his head. "If they don't, I'm sure there's a way to use the artifact to make it happen. Just gotta think about it really, really hard." Morgan, overhearing their banter, rolled her eyes with a fond smirk. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We've got plenty of work to do before we start planning our retirement on a beach planet." "True," Walter conceded, his grin undiminished. "But a guy can dream, right?" As the team settled back into the familiar rhythm of repairs and recovery, the mood shifted from tension to something resembling hope. The artifact, once a harbinger of disaster, had become a tool, a wild, unpredictable tool, but a tool nonetheless. And in the hands of a crew as resourceful and irreverent as theirs, it was bound to lead to more than a few adventures. Adventures that might just redefine the boundaries of what was possible, even in the bleakest corners of the cosmos. For now, though, it was enough to know that they'd won this round. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new mysteries, and undoubtedly new headaches. But with a spanner in hand, a sentient alien alliance, and a knack for improvisation, Walter Rigby and his motley crew were ready to face whatever the universe had in store. After all, as Walter liked to say, when the going gets tough, the tough start tinkering. And if that didn't sum up their approach to life on the edge of chaos, nothing did. Walter Rigby stood amidst the debris of what used to be the hub of the lunar colony, surveying the organized chaos with the seasoned eye of a professional chaos wrangler. The colony was less of a disaster zone now, and more of a very confused place trying to remember which way was up. Beside him, Zintak's gelatinous holographic form wobbled in what could only be described as a dignified jiggle. "You lot are like cockroaches," Zintak said, his holographic projection flickering slightly, "always managing to survive despite attempts to the contrary." "Flattery will get you everywhere, Zintak," Walter replied, casting a glance at the artifact, now encased in a makeshift containment field. "Survival's just our side hustle. We're really in the business of creative chaos." Across the room, Captain Jane No-Nonsense Morgan was directing the crew with all the patience of a drill sergeant with a mild hangover. Her commands were sharp and cutting, and the crew responded with the kind of enthusiasm reserved for tax audits and dental visits. "Get that generator back online before I kick it so hard it'll power the colony on spite alone," she barked, not looking up from the tablet that was her constant companion. Rico bounced over, his donkey ears flopping in a way that defied both physics and dignity. "Walter, you reckon this is all gonna hold, or are we one sneeze away from becoming cosmic shrapnel?" "Rico, my friend in this business, nothing holds forever," Walter replied with a lopsided grin. "But I'd say we're good for at least a coffee break." Rico chuckled, pulling out a packet of dubious-looking snacks that looked like they'd give indigestion to a black hole. "Want one?" "Guaranteed to taste like regret." Walter shook his head. "Nah, I'm saving my stomach for something less lethal, like barbed wire." As Rico made himself scarce, possibly seeking a less discerning taste tester, Zintak turned to Walter, his gooey visage reflecting a hint of curiosity. "Human imagination is potent. This, we have learned. But I am curious, what do you truly think of the artifact now?" Walter scratched his chin, looking at the swirling mass of potential chaos. "It's like a pet tiger on a sugar rush, dangerous, unpredictable, and you never know what it's going to do next. But if you can figure out how to steer it, the possibilities are." "Interesting? You trust this interesting?" Zintak asked, his form shimmering with the kind of skeptical curiosity that only an alien diplomat or a cat could master. "Trust is a strong word," Walter replied. "Let's just say I'm cautiously hopeful. Humans are good at two things: screwing up and finding new ways not to die, and this artifact. It might just be the best screw-up yet." The radio on Walter's belt crackled to life, Morgan's voice sharp as a spike. "Rigby, get your philosophical ass down to the control room. We've got a situation." "On my way," Walter sighed, gesturing to Zintak. "This is what I get for waxing poetic. Duty calls." He made his way through the labyrinthine corridors of the colony, each step a reminder of the chaos they'd narrowly avoided turning permanent. The control room was a bustle of activity, screens blinking with data that might as well have been hieroglyphs to anyone not versed in technobabble. Morgan stood in the center like a general surveying her troops, her eyes fixed on the largest screen. "We've got fluctuations in the containment field. I need those stabilized, or the artifact might decide to redecorate the colony's interior." Walter took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the readouts. "Right, so it's just another day in paradise then." "More like the Paradise Lost edition," Morgan retorted, not missing a beat. "You think you can handle it? Piece of cake," Walter said, though his confidence was the kind that came from someone who'd been thrown into the deep end enough times to develop gills. "Rico, get over here and bring your donkey ears. We're gonna need all hands on deck." As Rico joined him, Walter set to work, his fingers flying over controls that had seen better days. The generator hummed ominously, a testament to its habit of functioning more out of spite than engineering. "How's it looking?" Rico asked, peering over Walter's shoulder. "Like a house of cards in a wind tunnel," Walter replied, adjusting a dial with the tender care of someone defusing a bomb. But if we can keep those readings below critical, we might just make it through breakfast. Reassuring, Rico said, not looking reassured in the slightest. Walter's mind raced, his thoughts weaving a tapestry of what-ifs and oh-craps. The artifact was a force of nature, and trying to control it was like trying to hold back a tidal wave with a paper cup. But then this was what they did, turn madness into method, scrape by with duct tape and prayer. Containment's holding, Walter announced after a tense moment where time seemed to stretch like taffy. For now, anyway, Morgan nodded, a rare smile tugging at her lips. Good, we can't afford any more surprises. The council's gonna want a full report, and I'd rather not tell them we've redecorated with cosmic absurdity. They'll love it, Walter replied, grinning. Nothing like intergalactic interior design to spice up their lives. As the immediate crisis subsided, the crew took a collective breath, the atmosphere shifting from high tension to cautious optimism. Walter leaned back in his chair, the energy in the room a mix of relief and exhaustion. Think we're gonna be all right? Rico asked, his eyes scanning the room. Define all right, Walter said, his tone light despite the weight of reality pressing in on them. We're alive, the colony is not in pieces, and the artifact hasn't turned us into interstellar graffiti. I'd call that a win. Zintak's holographic form shimmered into existence nearby, his expression one of thoughtful contemplation. This cooperation between our peoples, it has potential, Walter snorted. Potential's just a fancy word for big question mark. But yeah, I think we might be onto something. There is much we can learn from each other, Zintak agreed, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of experience. Our understanding of the artifact can benefit greatly from your unique perspective. You mean our tendency to poke things we don't understand, Walter quipped, a smirk playing on his lips. Precisely, Zintak replied, his tone deadpan but not unkind. As the crew set about making the colony as operational as a barely held-together jumble could be, Walter found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. They danced with cosmic forces, flirted with disaster, and somehow emerged with all their limbs intact. Hey, Rigby, Colonel Sanders called from across the room, his voice carrying the peculiar cadence of someone who'd recently been less inflatable chicken and more human being. You reckon this is finally over, or are we going to be dealing with more cosmic shenanigans? Walter laughed, shaking his head. Colonel, if there's one thing I know, it's that nothing's ever really over. But for now, I'll take what I can get. Morgan approached, her stride purposeful, her eyes brimming with a determination that could bend steel bars. We've got our work cut out for us, but we've shown we can handle it. The artifact's a wild card, but it's our wild card. Here's to playing the cosmic hand we're dealt, Walter toasted with an invisible glass, his grin infectious. As they stood there contemplating the enormity of what they'd faced and what lay ahead, it was clear that this crew, this ragtag band of misfits and mad scientists, had a knack for defying the odds. They'd taken the unpredictable and turned it into opportunity, and if that didn't sum up the human spirit, nothing did. So, what next? Rico asked, leaning casually against a console. Next, Walter echoed, his eyes twinkling with a mixture of mischief and anticipation. We get ready for whatever the universe throws at us, and remember, when in doubt, improvise. As they fell into a companionable silence, the colony around them slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. The artifact, now more a symbol of potential than peril, seemed to hum in quiet approval, and for Walter, that was enough. They'd faced the unknown and lived to tell the tale. Whatever came next, they were ready. With laughter, grit, and a healthy dose of sarcastic irreverence, they would face the future head-on. After all, in the vast expanse of space, adventure was just another word for Tuesday.